then our, profit margins were much greater than when we're turning around and we're able to sell them. We're actually making some money. So at this point, we were just ordering small amounts, and they would mostly take them out to PWG and Reseda for those shows, and they would sell them. And they were one of the first ones. They would start going and they would just sit up on the ring and put their shirts on the ropes, and people would come up and buy their stuff. And that caught on pretty quick. Other wrestlers started doing it too. But then we got to a point where they weren't selling out of everything all at the same night, because we were buying larger quantities, hoping that, we would sell through everything. But then Matt would bring stuff back home. And I'm like, okay, well, we can't just have this stuff sitting here. Like, we need to figure something out. So I think he just started posting on Twitter, and people would send us an email or whatever. And we'd do like a PayPal deal. Like, somebody would PayPal us money, and then we'd send out their shirt. And then it got to be too much. And I'm like, okay, we need to have something a little bit more organized. Like, why don't you let me start just like a basic website? We'll put up just whatever inventory we have, and I'll start kind of looking into different things. So I started looking into e-commerce platforms and trying to understand PayPal a little bit more. We knew that we didn't want to put stuff up on eBay. We wanted something a little bit more professional than that, even though these were just two indie wrestlers at the time. Like, we wanted to come across as like knowing what we were doing. So that's kind of how that started. It gave me something to do and kept my mind off of being pregnant. I got taken off of work about a month before I was due, and I'm a busybody. I can't sit still. Like, I constantly have to have something going on. I can't just sit around. So it was a good thing for me to kind of keep my mind off things. It helped pass the time. And so Matt would come home, I'd pack orders, and then he would come home from the road. And I'm like, all right, got to go to the post office and drop off all these orders. Because at the time, I wasn't printing labels yet. I was handwriting everybody's addresses, and we'd have to stand in line and pay for the postage and go through that whole process. Eventually, we kind of grew even more, got into a bigger e-commerce platform where my mind was blown because I could print postage from my printer. And that was like a huge game changer. And then I found out I could go and have, like, I can request to have a post office pickup at our apartment. And I was like, oh my God, this is even better. Like, I don't have to even leave. I can put everything outside my door and they'll come pick everything up. So it just kind of grew from there. And I'm grateful that they trusted me to do that, because I didn't know what I was doing at first. I am completely self-taught when it comes to that. I looked on YouTube a lot. I Googled things, read up on things. I talked to, a couple of different people in the industry. I had a very easy, quick conversation with Colt, I remember in the beginning. But I mean, I was trying to kind of mimic what he had done with his website, but I was trying at the same time to have something completely different. Like, I didn't want it to be a copycat of what he was doing, but at least like have kind of like the basics and a foundation to kind of build off of. And it grew crazy. So we started everything when I was pregnant with Court. And then I went back to work full time after I had her. Things thankfully started kind of picking up for Matt and Nick. And then we realized that there was much more of a want for their stuff. So we started looking into doing hoodies, and we did scarves, and we did beanies, and we even did leggings at one point, where it was the same print as their tights. And I still cannot believe how popular those were at that point. Like, we sold out of them so quickly. And it was a challenge. It was a little bit risky too, because we were buying inventory that we held until it sold. And I didn't really understand how pre-orders worked yet at that point. So I wouldn't put stuff on sale until we bought everything, learning how to keep track of inventory. And that was like a whole nother beast that I didn't quite understand at first, making sure I didn't oversell on certain sizes and having to learn like how many different sizes of things. You don't want to get as many smalls as you do larges and extra larges, and just little things like that. So it was a fun thing. If you would have told 17-year-old me when Matt and I first met that I was going to at some point be selling merchandise for my husband while he's a professional wrestler, I would have said, I have no idea what you're talking about. That's never going to happen. But it helped us. It got us through some of like the worst times, and it helped us connect, at least for me, like, because I wasn't on the road with Matt. Matt and Nick did meet and greets all the time. It helped me connect with some of our fans that were constantly buying our new items. And I still talk to some of them through social media, and pre-COVID, I would see them at shows and they would come up and say hi to me and get to catch up and just see how they're doing. And so yeah, it has been a wild ride, and I feel like it has gone by so dang quick. Like this was 10 years ago that we started doing this kind of thing, and it's insane that it's even been that long. Like I don't know. It's gone by so fast.
It is crazy. I want to just kind of stop down a little bit and dig into a couple of things that you said, and I took a couple notes. The first thing, and it's something that comes up on the show quite often, is sort of this thing that was built of necessity, right? Like you and Matt are in a position you're in. He's leaving TNA. You're pregnant. This is not the time not to have income, and so it's full speed ahead. How can we make this work? And then the second thing is just asking, right? Like the fact that you had to just decide you're going to do this thing, and now you have to ask a bunch of people a bunch of questions about how to do it and figure it out on your own. Was there a time where you went, you know what, this is just too much work. I'm not going to go forward with this. I'll just get a 9-to-5 and be done with this?
Yes and no. It definitely was harder to keep up with once I went back to work. I returned back to work after maternity leave when Court was about 4 months old. And I remember there were times where I had to just kind of take everything off of availability on the site, where I would tell Matt like straight out, like I need at least like a week or two break. Like I am so overwhelmed. Because so I went back to work, it was like February of 2012 with Courtney. And then like 6 or 7 months later, I actually got promoted at my job, which was tremendous. Like the timing was amazing. But then it was more stress on me, more workload. Granted, my hours were still the same. My days off changed slightly. But it was a lot more on my shoulders that I was having to kind of carry around. And then having a baby at home, a husband that travels all the time, that doesn't have like a typical work schedule, just all these different things. And so there were times where I was like, I kind of started second guessing the whole thing. And I'm like, okay, maybe we need to not do this online thing as much, but it helped to take a break every so often. It just kind of gave me that refresh that I needed. And then like we would have, and those times that we didn't have anything on the site, we'd have people emailing, asking us like, when are you going to put stuff back up? And so that kind of helped me realize too, that there still was that demand. Like people were actually catching on to what we were doing, and they were expecting us, you know, to have new items up every so often. But there were several times where I was ready to kind of throw in the towel because I was just so overwhelmed, especially when you fast forward a little bit more to when we had Zach. We were in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. It was about 1,000 square feet. And we had a dining room, but it wasn't our dining room. It was my office and my warehouse to stock all of our inventory. And so it made things difficult. I was like getting to a point where I'm like, okay, I know this stuff is selling, but like it's taking over everything. Like, how am I still doing this? But I knew it meant a lot to Matt and Nick too. So part of it, like I just had to kind of push those feelings down and just kind of suck it up and push through it. And thank God I did. Like I don't know what would have happened if I ended up walking away from it. But there was also a part of me too that really enjoyed what I did. It was funny. I was at Revolution, jumping ahead a little bit to go back to the story and kind of connect the two. I was at Revolution last weekend. I flew out so I could help my team sell merch. We're doing everything contactless right now. So everything's ordered through a mobile site. And then once we get the order, we bag it and we let the people know it's ready to come pick up. So Chrissy had told me that it was really busy at the last couple of pay-per-views and it would be helpful if I was there. So I came in, and she and the other guy were getting everything all set up, ready to go. And I saw that we had like 100 orders, and I'm like, okay, I'm diving in. I'm going to start bagging this stuff. And she's like, you don't need to yet. And I'm like, no, this is giving me like anxiety that we have this many orders. We were still like two and a half hours, I think, from doors, but I just knew like I wanted to get a jump on it. And they had like their own routine that they were going through, and like I didn't want to step in and mess it up. So I told them like, it's fine. I'm like, this was like therapy for me back when we had Young Bucks merch. Like I love doing this, pulling the orders, packing it all up, getting it ready to go. And that's kind of how it was for me with Young Bucks merch. Like that's exactly what it was. I would get the kids down for bed, And then I would stay up sometimes till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning working after I had already worked my full time job. It was crazy. Like Matt would think I was nuts. Like he would go in and go to bed and I'm still sitting there packing and getting things ready to be shipped out that week or, whatever. So
where do you think that comes from? Because you told me, you were a teenager, your dad started sweeping floors,
yeah,
worked his way through, ended up buying the business. You were sleeping in, but clearly you were soaking in some of that, right?
I think just seeing how hard he and my mom both worked. My mom worked for a major utility company when I was growing up. And she ended up leaving that job to go work for our church as a youth director. And that was a big move for her financially. Like she took a huge cut in pay, but it was something that she enjoyed doing. And so I think that's where I got that from. And then with my dad, obviously, he amazes me. Like the way that his brain works. I have a younger brother who's in the Navy now. He's an engineer in the Navy and his brain works so much like my dad's. And I tease both of them all the time where I'm like, can you just download all of that like onto a removable drive or something so I can put it in my brain? Like I would love to know how you guys are able to think these things through so quickly. But my dad, I don't know, like he's always had a great business sense, and my mom too. The fact that my mom was able to come in when she did, when we discovered the embezzling that was happening in the office, and she was able to kind of come in and take over. And this was an industry that she had never worked in before either. But she was in a very, I think, important position when she worked. She worked for Edison, which is our electric company out here in Southern California. She worked there for years and years and years. And I think just given her background with her office work that she did, and everything at that job, I think that kind of helped her. But she had me working on Excel spreadsheets when I was very young. I was always interested in what she was doing. And then with my dad, I had to order things for him sometimes. Like I knew all about purchase orders. I knew a lot about shipping already because I had to process orders for shipment every day through UPS and FedEx. So I definitely got like little bits here and there from both of them. It's crazy. I don't know. Like just knowing how much my parents went through and they never gave up. I think that kind of helped me too. Because after, I don't think I touched on this, after we found out about the embezzlement, we found out that there were a lot of things that weren't done as far as like taxes and things went. And so a couple years after that, it was actually the same year, around the same time I was pregnant with Courtney. It was 2011. My parents had to file bankruptcy on the business and shut their doors. And that was hard because Matt was still working there off and on. And this was, of course, around the same time that he left TNA. So he kind of went back, tail between his legs, asking for his, old job back because we're trying to make ends meet, right? We're trying to put money away for this kid that's coming. And then my parents, like a phoenix, rose from the ashes. They started a new company. It's been 8.5, 9 years now, and it's thriving. They're doing a great job. It's literally just the two of them now running this business. My dad cut pretty much all of his overhead that he could. He doesn't have any employees working for him now, so he's able to just kind of do everything himself. But I think that they are a huge reason why we have been so successful, just having them as kind of a model to kind of go after, and see, even when it gets tough, you've got to push through, even if it's something that makes you uncomfortable. I've learned too, that those moments that you're so uncomfortable, it forces you to grow and expand like so much. I know that sounds so cliche, but it's so true. Like those times where I just thought like, oh my God, we're not going to be able to make rent this month or, whatever it was. Like we somehow figured it out. Like my parents would have to bail us out every once in a while. We'd have a great weekend with merch or, something would happen and we'd somehow pull through and we'd make it work.
Well, I mean, they're cliches for a reason, right? Like it's true. Like it's,
Yep.
Pressure creates diamonds.
Yep.
It's just what it is.
And it's weird because that's the best way that I work now is under pressure. Last minute deadlines. Yeah. I mean, give me as much pressure and I put out my best work usually at those moments.
So I want to go back to the kind of the timeline here. Okay. The initial growth that you guys saw as Matt and Nick rose in popularity and kind of jumped onto the national scene and people started taking notice of some of the PWG stuff via, tape trading or DVD trading, whatever. what was the tipping point? Because wrestlers sell merch to fans. It's what they do at independent
Right.
shows. It's what they do. But clearly something made